So have you noticed how the mind pitches itself against a better version of itself? That it's constantly in a conversation of putting itself against a better version of itself. And then in a conversation about how it's not meeting its own expectations, how it could do better. Just to see how that in itself, that inner conversation itself is a distraction away from the beauty and wholeness of what is true, as in the true essential nature. That we are opening to remember the still silent peace of the being that we are, that which is undisturbable in the face of anything that is moving and changing. And yet we use everything that seems to move and change us, want to change us. We use that as a way of discovering what is still holding as expectation, as persona, as identity in the system. That we're never needing to change from the mind's perspective into a better version of me, but we are discovering the true essence nature, and that essence nature naturally allows the relaxation of the holding patterns of protection, and with that the behaviors that move from conditioning and protection, armoring and guarding. And so when we are resting, we open to a field of silent being, where natural realization happens, a deeper connection to the source intelligence, the true essence nature of who and what we are, what this life is. That we're not trying to change the world, and we're not trying to change the me. We are just shifting the perspective of seeing to one that is real and true. We are shifting the perspective of seeing from resting our focus upon this idea where we have these expectations of a better version of me that allows there to be a constant internal conversation of what I'm not doing quite right, what I'm getting wrong, what I could do better, how I'm failing, and how I'm not meeting the expectations that I have for myself and my life. And in a way, that conversation is the hook, right? It's the hook of the mind to constantly be chasing something and believing that I can control. But when we actually rest and realize that we are one with life, with the forces of nature, we are one with the true power, then we enter into a flow, a current, a collaboration with what is. And we know what everything is in essence. So we realize that trying to change anything at the frequency at which the discordance has been created, so trying to change the world in the world, can't have any impact, because the world, as we see it, is just a reflection of the mind. And if the mind is in power, then we believe that that is what is real and true. But as we allow the mind to settle into the heart intelligence, we realize what is the reality, and we realize that the only shift and change can come is in our perspective of seeing. And of course, we could say that the more beings that are resting in this truth, then the picture, the play of the world is going to shift. but it doesn't shift in the ways that we think that it will shift. And it's in coming to our essence nature and opening to the unity frequency of everything, and realizing that the shift is in the frequency. It's the frequency that we're living, the frequency of our recognition, and that resonant frequency vibration that we are living at. And it's the only thing that we need to shift. And life is constantly offering us these opportunities and possibilities to meet the ways that the frequency that we are living in is discordant and is a frequency of belief or a frequency of conditioning. Sometimes this can be spoken of as old timelines or karmic frequency or karmic resonance, right? So when we're creating from the karmic resonance, we're creating from a place that expects a certain outcome. We could say expects a disappointing outcome, expects to not be seen, expects for things to be hard, expects for things to be challenging or painful. And of course, if we're creating from a frequency that expects, then we can feel kind of powerful in our creation, because, well, I kind of knew that was going to happen. But that's not the frequency vibration of true life, of true power. It's how the intelligence works to give us a feedback of what inside us is as yet unmet and unloved, and giving us this graced opportunity to meet what we have not yet met in the light of awareness and brought to the illumined principle to be unified and undivided in our lived experience. So the mind can have many reasons why not to, or why it's hard, or even, well, it doesn't actually work. Because the mind is a frequency of a victim that constantly feels like it's not getting where it should be, not getting what it wants, and is definitely not really always meeting its own expectations. But often those expectations are created not out of an attunement with our intuitive knowing and our unique laws of nature, but often those ideas and expectations for ourselves and our life are created out of ideas of who we should be, trying to fit in to a collective consciousness that itself is discordant, and we could even say corrupt. But so there's a grace when we don't fit into that. There's a grace where we're not seeming to find the kind of flow that gives our mental expectations a sense of fulfillment, because we won't ever feel fulfilled if we're trying to meet ideas of who we should be rather than actually being who we are here to be, who we are wired to be, and resting in the divine plan for who we are. And in a way, all that we are being invited into is to rest in the sense of being here, where we can feel and recognize the simple stillness and silence. And it's in the stillness and the silence that revelation happens. The mind wants techniques, it wants actions, it wants adventure, it wants excitement, it wants experience, and it wants to be and get what it wants now. It's concerned with performance. It's concerned with efficiency and getting results. And of course, within the play of the life, that can feel like it's effective, and the me can feel even at times quite satisfied by that kind of performative success, right? But does it bring peace? Does it bring true happiness? Does it bring us to a causeless happiness and joy? Does it bring us to freedom? Or does it bring us to a constant striving to want more? A constant striving to not lose what I think I've achieved? In a way, what brings us to our knees is the greatest grace. What brings us to recognize a deeper truth of who I am, a deeper truth that allows us to listen deeply to the intuitive knowing and flow as life, so we can feel where there's a yes. We can actually follow the joy, right? As Joseph Campbell said, follow the bliss. And I'm paraphrasing, it will open doors that you could not have imagined that were there and available to you. And the mind would say, well, that doesn't really sound very sensible. But of course, the mind is in the same club with Eeyore, right? From Winnie the Pooh. Everything is hard. It's just always going to be hard. I never get what I want, right? So if we're in this sense of the mind constantly feeling like it's never going to be good enough, because there's a deeply held frequency belief that there's something wrong with me. That I've done something wrong, that I'm not good, or that I have been wronged, holding that frequency of the victim. And then constantly telling myself that I'm somehow failing. I'm not achieving my full potential. I need to push harder. I need to do more. What if it's about just following the joy and realizing that what is here is exactly what grace is offering us? That I want nothing else but what you bring, great glory. Because what you bring is exactly what is needed for me to know myself in the deepest possible way. So just noticing as these words come, how do they resonate? What do they point you to? What do they illuminate? What do they enliven? And what do they stir? Right? Because in a way, we're not even speaking about having some kind of mythic realization or awakening, which the mind also, as part of its conversation and expectations for itself, it can also be creating a goal of a moment that's going to change everything, right? What a great, glorious possibility. The great, glorious moment that's going to change everything, that somehow I'm not actually worthy of ever receiving or falling into that kind of grace, because I deeply believe that I'm not actually worthy of that. That I'm a sinner. That it just doesn't happen to people like me. But in a way, the whole expectation of such an event is the mind's interpretation of what that so-called awakening or what that so-called enlightenment actually is. And the mind sees that possibility as get me out of Dodge, right? Get me away from myself. But the curious thing is that even when everything blows open and the doors blow off, here you are, right? You're still here. Yes, there's another perspective of seeing, like a wider perspective of seeing. And that wider perspective of seeing gives us the opportunity to meet what life brings. But life still continues to bring exactly what it's going to bring. And it's bringing what it is to give us the opportunity to embody constantly what we are opening to. And so in a way, the invitation isn't holding a dangling carrot of some kind of event happening, if you're lucky. It's that if you rest here now and you just be here, you can discover the awake field. You can discover the stillness, the silence and presence of your own heart. You can discover the freedom of just simply being. And you can open to the possibility of following what brings you joy, what feels inspiring, what brings you alive. And trust that if you follow and say yes to the nudges, the clues, and the very obvious invitations that life is offering, that everything starts to shift in glorious and profound ways. That life can only be as it is. So just resting and receiving. As we rest and we receive, we open to recognize the silence and the stillness. Resting and receiving opens us to be able to receive the play of the world in a way that doesn't create the same kind of discordance and fear as the mind can be engaged in. When the mind is engaged in a perspective of dividing and limiting, when the mind is engaged in fear, then the play of the world can feel like a challenging and scary place. But life is always going to be somewhat chaotic, because life itself is a playground. It's a play, a divine lila. When the perspective of seeing it is that it is God dancing in God, that it is love, in love with itself, flowing as life, whatever it looks like, then fear cannot take us into seeing from a perspective that is in collaboration with the collective belief that there is something wrong. And that sense that there is something wrong with me, comes from unmet, unloved, unhealed beliefs that come from deep-rooted hurt and a sense of feeling powerless and helpless. that sense of feeling powerless and helpless is because we have found ourselves in situations where we're trying to change the world, trying to change the experience, but we're trying to change it from a frequency perspective that is expecting disappointment and expecting a certain outcome. So when we can see how all of this is unfolding and we can shift the frequency, we could say the operating system, where we are broadcasting and operating from, this is what opens things up for us. And so in the resting and coming to the stillness and silence, in a way, everything that we are longing for is here. And it is about resting deeply enough in the field of silent presence that the intelligence comes online, the connection to source just naturally is recognized to be present, and everything reorganizes and restructures. Yeah. Everything happens by itself. It's about opening to the fullness of ourselves so that there's the spaciousness for the intelligence to move. And it's to know that the upgrades are happening. They are happening. So in the resting here, just noticing what is alive in your field. What are you noticing? How are these words touching you? What are they enlivening or stirring in you? And just be with the frequency field, the feeling field. Just feel the fullness of the frequency field. Feel the sense of presence, your own presence, wide and unbounded. Feel the sense of your presence at the point of the body-mind. Feel the sense of expansion, of opening, of being. Feel yourself here, now, just resting. Opening to the feeling field, being with the energies and aliveness of this moment, the fullness of this moment. What you can feel obviously in the body as energy, as sensation, and what you can feel as a sense of expansion or opening. What is the felt sense of presence? Just to be with it all, dropping into the infinite unboundedness of this moment. Opening to the timelessness of just being here now, just now, here now, just as you are. grace received and gratitude for this moment just as it is. Being with the subtlety of the feeling field, feeling yourself here. To meet yourself and to know yourself, the essence nature is to meet the feeling field in its entirety without dividing, without separating, without rejecting or pushing any part of this moment away, not pushing any part of yourself away. Receiving yourself, receiving the fullness of yourself as this moment, right now.